Hey everybody, I am here to finally do my Stephen King Part 2 video. I want this video to be the 3 book reviews for Misery, Carrie, and Desperation, which is in my book Christmas Tree. I'll put a little picture of him over here so y'all can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, so I wanted to be these 3 book reviews, and I also want it to be more of a, where should I start with Stephen King? So, the timestamp will be down below for the where to start with Stephen King, because I kind of want to do the book reviews first. So, also the old Stephen King video that I made, or not old, but the first Stephen King author and review kind of thing I made will be also linked down below if you want to go check that out to get more book reviews on the other books that I've read by him. So, firstly, I just finished Carrie like a few hours ago, but I really did enjoy it, and I can say though that it is very much it's very much clear that this is the first book he ever got published, because his writing has improved greatly since this book. I will say going into this book that the pacing is definitely jarring, because it kind of is following through different people's storytelling ability for people who survived the Carrie incident. It's telling like through flashbacks and from them telling the stories, and then it's also some of it's from Carrie's perspective and some of it's like news and court articles. So it's very jarring, and I don't think it would go over very well on audio. But in terms of the story itself, it was alright. I gave it 3 stars. I probably won't ever reread it, but I didn't hate it either. So, yeah, the story basically for Carrie is, if you haven't seen the movie or kind of know what happens, because I feel like this book and story came out so long ago that it's hard to not know what happened in it, even on just a little bit, but there's this high schooler, Carrie, who has these telekinetic powers and is basically picked on and bullied, and ultimately decides to use those powers to get back at everybody. So I enjoyed it. It was a fun story. I read it super fast. It's small. It's very easy to read. The pacing is a little jarring, but other than that, Carrie. Misery. Also, I love this like book cover design. I don't really know what. I just like it's very minimal, and I like the red. I did like this one a lot. I was reading it, however, in a time that I was kind of in a reading slump, so I didn't really love it as much as other people do. I gave it also 3 stars just because I really wasn't in a good place to be reading Stephen King. But basically, we follow Paul Sheldon, a famous novelist who has finally met his biggest fan, which is Annie Wilkes, and she basically she basically hits him with her car so that way she can then kidnap him, and where he's virtually disabled, and so she can get him to finish writing or to continue a storyline in one of his series. Misery Chastain is the heroine in the series, anyways, Paul Sheldon decides to kill off Misery in his stories because he doesn't want to write Misery anymore, and he doesn't want to follow these characters. He wants to go and write this like great American novel, so he's like, gonna kill y'all off so we can move on. Annie Wilkes does not think that's a great idea, therefore brutally injuring him, kidnapping him, and torturing him into finishing her storyline and not killing off this character. And it's brutal, it's terrifying. Annie Wilkes is a great villain. And we kind of just get to see Annie descend into madness throughout the course of this book, and I really do recommend this one. It's a good time. It's a good time. As I did mention, my Desperation copy is in the Christmas tree bush situation over there, but Desperation, and I'll put a picture up over here, was a great book. I loved it a lot, actually. I wasn't expecting to. I had never heard very much about it, but the copy I had was about this big, and I was like, oh my god, this is long. It's actually really only like 620 pages or something like that. It's the pages are pretty thick in the book and all of that, but basically I loved it. I think I gave it a 5 stars, actually, which I haven't done for a King book in a while. But before we talk about desperation, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Yeah, I really love desperation. So basically, there's weird fantastical elements in this book, so it's almost like, I would even almost like judge desperation as a fantasy horror book, if that makes sense, just because the magic basically takes over the minds of a few different people in this town, Desperation, Arizona, I believe. Don't quote me on that. To basically kill everyone and destroy everything, and basically we get introduced to this town via this cop who is pulling people over for crimes they didn't commit, killing, kidnapping, taking them back to Desperation, and he does this multiple times, and we get to meet multiple different people that he goes and kidnaps by pulling them over for alleged crimes that they did not actually commit. And we get to kind of, this whole cast comes together in this town to try and survive. Not all of them do, obviously. It's horrifying. It's very scary. And we do get to see the magic kind of like melt the mind of the original dude and kind of take over other people's minds. And it's this whole band of people coming together to try and defeat the evil and the magic that has taken over this town. So it's really hard to say more than that, and that might even have been some spoilers. Sorry, guys. But that's about all I'll say for Desperation. I really loved it. The suspense was super there, and I was very impressed because I've literally never heard anything about that book. So I think at this point we can now kind of talk about where you should start with Stephen King. So at 6 minutes and 52 seconds, because I don't edit my videos. I do them all in basically one fell swoop. So I'm going to pull out my stack here and kind of just tell y'all where I recommend you start with Stephen King. We're going to throw these two guys on top. So Stephen King does a lot of good things and a lot of very different things in a lot of his books. And I think one thing that people don't really realize about Stephen King is that he writes a lot more than just horror. And he's done a few different things, and everybody basically refuses to let Stephen King get out of this horror mold, and for reasons I get it. I would say there's definitely horror elements in every single type of book he does write, though, because that's what he's very good at. I think a good natural place to start, though, for Stephen King is The Shining. It is one of his most famous books for a reason. It's not one of his super long books because, let's be real, this is intimidating. And so if you're wanting to get into Stephen King and you want to see what he is all about, and I think this is one of his best books, the horror is super there, and I will say Stephen King's writing style is not like eloquent necessarily, and Daniel Green put it really well. He doesn't have to use these $4 words. And I'll link to Daniel Green's video about Stephen King because it was just the best way I've heard someone vocalize what Stephen King is and why he's so good at what he does with his writing. So he's not particularly eloquent, but you don't need to be when you're trying to instigate fear. So go check out his video if you want to know more what I'm talking about. But this is a good place to start. It is one of the most famous books for a reason. You probably know at least some of the plot points. So if you're a little bit like worried about being scared, there's enough adaptations of this that you should kind of know what's going to happen at least a little bit, and it should help you to get through this book. However, if you're just like, I don't want to do the scary stuff, I don't want to like deal with The Shining, which is kind of a magic thing that happens. I was like, I don't want to experience the horror in this hotel in Colorado, and I don't want to see people die. I mean, you'll see people die in every Stephen King book, I can't say that, but you don't want to really do as much of the horror. Under his pen name, Richard Bachman, he wrote The Long Walk. This is also a short, very approachable book, and it's a dystopian novel about these kids, kind of like in the Hunger Games, except for instead of killing each other, you basically have to walk until you die, or at a certain pace, you can't really stop to eat or drink or sleep or anything. You basically have to walk at a certain miles per hour rate. And if you drop below that for more than 5 seconds, you get shot, kind of thing. It's a survival of the fittest kind of story. And it was really good. It wasn't as horrifying as some of his other books are, but it was definitely suspenseful, and it kind of did. This is what the first book I read for Stephen King, because I was like, I want to see what it's all about, but I don't want to, I'm scared about being scared because I'm the world's biggest chicken. I can't even watch, like, the trailers to scary movies. It's not a thing. So I really did enjoy this book, and it had enough of the, like, suspenseful, scary scenes that I was like, okay, I made it through this. I can go check this one out. This was the second one I read. And the beauty, if you like The Shining, if you start here, is that there is a sequel, which this book is not scary, really. Like, you follow the same kid who is in this book, Danny Torrance, so Dan Torrance, because he's an adult here, in a... Like, and I really didn't feel this one was very scary, but I read this entire book in one sitting because it was so suspenseful and it was so good, and I loved it a lot. And I'm actually planning on rereading these in order because there was such a long time between this book and, like, when I read this one. But in this one, we follow Dan Torrance as an adult, where he's called Dr. Sleep because he uses his powers with The Shining to kind of help old people, like, and the pain they're in nursing homes, and, like, to help them to actually rest, which is a cool thing. But he basically finds another kid who's coming into their powers, and he finds this kid and basically has to protect her through the people that are hunting her because of her powers. So it is, like, suspenseful. I wouldn't call it horror necessarily, and I definitely recommend it. So if you want a good place to start to kind of get some of the more fantastical elements for Stephen King is something he's really known for, obviously this one, and then this one is a great... I know there's mixed reviews on this book, but I really loved it, and y'all should too. So I know these are basically my recommendations for starting points. I do want to make a few comments, though, about Stephen King. If you're more into, like, the murder mystery, like police detective crime novels, Mr. Mercedes is really good. The villain is really messed up in the head, and it was hard for me to get through the villain. I had to literally take breaks from reading this book because of how, like, literally effed up in the head the villain was. So obviously take that into account with your reading. The Stand, while it is massive, is a fabulous book, also dystopian novel. It's about a plague, a pandemic, so maybe don't read it this year, but it's really good, and it's super awesome, and I read it in April, and I had a really hard time with, like, the first third of the book because if it goes into, like, excruciating detail about how everyone got sick and how the plague spread and everyone died. Probably should not have read that in April, but the rest of the book and kind of, like, society reforming and this black man, dark man that they had to go, who was kind of the more... I guess fantastical villain in this case. Stephen King writes a lot of fantasy, by the way, everybody, if you didn't know that. And so, yeah, this was a really good book. If you want to try one of his chunkier guys, I recommend this many times over this. I will say just about a few other, like, recommendation points about Stephen King is that he is really good at what he does, but some of his endings are a little lackluster, and some of his descriptions go on way longer than, like, necessary in any way, shape, or form. A good example of that is this book and the entire Dark Tower series, which I have also read. The one thing that I think is a good redeeming factor for the Dark Tower series, because I really don't recommend you read that. Like, I did not have a good time, and the ending really messed with me. But some people love the ending, some people hate the ending. It was a very decisive choice that he made, and I get why he did it, but it, like, for the amount of time I put into that series, I was upset about it. What I will say about the Dark Tower series, though, is that if you read it, it connects a lot of dots in the Stephen King universe, and it kind of explains how all of the magic and how all of the villains are connected, and Stephen King is actually a character in the Dark Tower books, so I think it's good for connecting the whole universe. Book 4 through the first half of book 5 were really basically all of the bad, overly long explanations and ramblings from this book were like 1.5 whole books that were each like 900 pages. So that's all I'll say about Stephen King, and kind of just some recommendations for getting into his stuff. So let me know what y'all thought about this video. I've talked for a lot longer than I expected. So in recap, these books in Desperation were really good, and 2 good places to start with Stephen King if you're a little bit more afraid of the horror, and if you're just ready to dive right into the horror. So let me know what y'all think about this video. I don't know if I'll put another Stephen King related video out for a while because I don't have any more of his books to read at this point in time. But yeah, I think I might actually do a reading vlog for when I do these 2 in hopefully January. So yeah, if I do end up rereading these, I will do a reading vlog for y'all. So yeah, that is all I have to say about that. Thank you for watching this video, and sorry it took me so long to put out. My reading life was not together, and it took me forever to read Carrie. So, see y'all next time. Like, subscribe, let me know what y'all thought about this video, and where you guys started with Stephen King if you've read his books before.